Hey everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Today we're working on a 2000 Chevy S10 four-wheel drive. It has the 4.3 liter V6 under the hood, and the customer complaint is an intermittent long crank time. He says sometimes in the morning it just cranks, and then he lets off the key, and then he cranks and it fires right up. Okay. Sometimes after a hot soak, again, same thing. Cranks, nothing. Cranks again, fires right up. So in this case, I'm not suspecting a spark issue like a bad rotor cap, which is fairly common on these. They just get oxidized and the spark doesn't get to the spark plugs. I'm suspecting a fuel delivery issue. So in this case, first thing, before plugging in the scanner or anything, get your fuel pressure gauge out. And these things all have Schrader valves, which is really nice. So it only takes 2 seconds to connect your fuel pressure gauge. So right there, bring it up on the windshield, and let's see what it does. There's our problem. Let's try again. Instant bleed down. So it looks like the pressure is going up to 60, which is good, but it bleeds off quickly. So let's see, let's crank it. Seems to fire right up. Snap the throttle a couple times. Pressure goes up on a snap throttle. That's also good. But as soon as we shut the engine off, boom. Okay. So suspicions are confirmed. We have a pressure bleed down problem. If I can zoom out. There we go. And now the question is, where is the pressure going? Or where's the fuel bleeding off to? And we're losing pressure on the fuel rail. This is a traditional return type system. Well, almost traditional. So we have two fuel lines. There's the one that my pressure gauge is attached to. That's the feed. And right next to it is the return, the skinnier one. So the pressure is fed through the fat line, and this is the GM Spider injection system with poppet valves. You can see the fuel goes right in here into the intake manifold, and inside the intake manifold is a kind of like a spider of poppets, little plastic lines that go to each one of the 6 cylinders, and they are sequentially fired. You can see the electrical connectors right there. So the injectors are, well, it depends on what version you have, but the electrical part is, centralized, and then at the end of each plastic line, there's a mechanical poppet valve that only opens, I think, about 50 psi or so. So in this case, you might ask, where is the pressure regulator? Well, that is also inside of the intake manifold. It's all one assembly, and the pressure inside the intake manifold, it directly acts on that diaphragm on the spider, which regulates our pressure. So in order to determine if the bleed down is occurring internally in there, maybe the diaphragm's ruptured, or the pressure could be bleeding off back into the tank through the pump. It could be a bad check valve. So what we need to do is find some rubber lines, hopefully this thing has some, that we can pinch off and isolate where this bleed off is occurring. I'll put a link in the description. ScannerDanner has a great case study on, I think, exactly the same truck where the same thing was occurring, and there the problem was the diaphragm actually ruptured and the fuel was leaking right into the intake manifold and causing like a severe rich condition. We could look at fuel trims, see if there's a pool of fuel in there. So we could do that before pinching off any lines, but that's a good start. So on this Chevy S10 with the fuel bleed down problem, we have to isolate where the pressure is bleeding off. So here's a quick schematic of this return type fuel system. We have an electric fuel pump in the fuel tank. It's about a 60 psi feed. It goes into the intake manifold, has a set of injectors, a built-in pressure regulator, which is, the diaphragm is open to the intake manifold vacuum right there, and then the return, the green line, is 0 psi, just dumps it back into the tank. So when our pump is running, we do have 60 psi in the rail, but when we turn the pump off, we immediately lose that pressure. So the question is it feeding back through the pump, through the check valve back into the tank, or is it in this pressure regulator? It could either be stuck open, that little spring-loaded valve could be stuck open, it could be letting the fuel right back down the return pipe, or it could be bleeding past this diaphragm, if there's a tear right here, and dumping into our intake manifold and also bleeding off that way. If that's the problem, we would also have rich codes or really negative fuel trims if there's a puddle of fuel collecting in our intake manifold because of this ruptured pressure regulator. So the two ways to attack this right now is A, plug in a scanner, look at fuel trims while the truck is running, shut it off, let it sit. If the fuel accumulates in here on startup, it'll be super rich. The second thing we can do is, hopefully somewhere along these lines there's a rubber section that we can pinch off. So let's say we pinch off the return hose, turn the pump on, and then turn it back off. If the pressure holds, if we have a blockage, let's say we block off the line right here. If the pressure holds, what does that mean? That means the problem is in this pressure regulator, meaning the valve is stuck open. If nothing changes when we pinch the return line off, then it could still be the check valve in the fuel pump, and it could still be an internal leakage of this regulator into the intake manifold. So I kind of wanted to plug in a scanner just to make sure there are no rich codes, see what the oxygen sensor is doing. The truck seems to run fine once it starts up, so I don't think it's an internal regulator leak, but for the sake of education, let's just plug in a scanner real quick and see the fuel trims. So I just recently got this little guy in the mail from Bosch. They just wanted me to review it, and generally I don't really use these smaller scan tools, since if we're going to look at data, I want to look at data. But yeah, we'll try it out. Ooh, color screen. It's kind of fancy for an Actron. Let's see. Turn key off, turn key on, enter. I don't know if this will auto ID a 2000 Chevy, so that's the previous vehicle. I already put it in. But if you want to start over, see, it does not support auto ID. Let's just go to OBD2. Might be the quickest way here. You just want to look at fuel trims and oxygen sensor readings. Let's see, no codes. Okay, let's try data stream view. 329 PIDs, huh? Let's see, entire data list. Let's do custom. No, we don't want instructions. We'll figure it out. So let's see, make sure we're in closed loop. Long-term fuel trim. And I don't know why they're showing two long-term fuel trims, because this thing only has one oxygen sensor, I think. 1121. Okay, it might have two banks, but we're just interested in one of them. Short-term fuel trim, okay, and that should be it. Okay, enter. I wonder if we can graph. All right, let's see what happens. Long crank time with the fuel pressure high. Our oxygen sensor is rich. Runs a little rough. Still an open loop. Just warming it up a little bit. Oh, come on. There we go. Short term started correcting. You see negative 14. Negative 14, negative 15 you saw there. Okay. Put in gear. I wonder why it still says open loop here, because obviously it's in closed loop. Trim numbers are fairly negative. And long term is not really correcting there, but so not really definitive yet. If it was like pegged out in minus 30, then yeah, I would say we have a leaking internal fuel pressure regulator problem. But in this case, so you lose all our fuel pressure. Started okay. See, that's going to minus 20 there. What I'm going to do is cycle this pump on and off several times. See if it'll cause like a really, really rich condition when we start it up. Let's see how negative this fuel trim will go. Negative 20. And it kind of gets better. Okay, so I was looking for an easy place to pinch off these fuel lines. Here's a fuel filter. Excuse me. And then these lines are actually nylon, plastic lines. We cannot pinch these. They will break, and then we'll have a whole host of other issues. That is a shame, because what do you do in this case? How do we isolate the problem? Well, this is the connector for the return line. If we want to block off the return line, we could take it off of here, adapt another pipe into this hose, and block off, our substituted pipe. I think that might be the quickest way to do it, because we're not going to pinch any of these lines. And if we block this off and nothing changes, then we'll have to find another way to isolate the problem. Well, I think a quicker way to go about this is to just undo these lines up here, and I think they're just O-rings sitting in this injector body, and from there we can do manual pressure checks with, you know, an air line or an air hose and see, you know, if we feed in pressure into here, if it holds or not, if it comes out the return side, or we can backfeed pressure into the feed line and see if that holds. That'll check our fuel pump check valve. Alrighty, let's undo these nuts. Let's see where this goes. Now, we don't have any pressure here, so I'm not worried about getting sprayed in the face, but safety goggles would definitely be a good idea. So there's the little retainer plate. Take that off. There's the return line. And here should be our pressure line. That guy's definitely out, so they're kind of inset in there. And then this guy should be the same. Okay, he's out. Sweet. Now we can do our experiments right up here. Alright, here's the experiment. Airline, regulator, fuel injection hose, and I put it right on the nipple of the feed line going back to our fuel tank. So, let's say we have, so when you squeeze the trigger here, we're feeding about 30 psi back into the pump. Can you hear that? And here's where the fuel pressure gauge again comes into play. So as I squeeze the nozzle, we go up to 30 psi, I let it go, you can hear the pressure bleeding off into the fuel tank through the fuel pump check valve. I think that's pretty neat. This is a lot quicker than pinching off, or I mean in this case it wasn't even possible to pinch off the fuel lines because they're nylon. So that's it. I like this test. It's actually kind of a spontaneous creation. So again, let's try that again. And when I release this, the pressure should hold in the fuel line if our check valve is good, and we should be able to see, you know, the pressure hold here. So 40 or 30 psi, let it go, bleeds right off, right through the check valve. So that's the call. We need a new fuel pump. In this case, you need to do this check because it could either be the fuel pump in the fuel tank or this spider injection system, and both of which are pretty kind of pricey jobs. You know, if you buy the whole unit, you gotta tear apart the top of the engine here or drop the tank, get a new fuel pump. So either way, you can't just say, oh, replace the fuel pump and the spider injection system. That's not really diagnosing anything. So yeah, that's it. And if the customer lets me do the job, I'll bring you along. If not, that was it. Fuel pressure bleed down problem on this Chevy S10. Bad pump, check valve. Alright guys, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. So I thought for the sake of completeness, we might as well check this pressure regulator inside the injector assembly because, you know, we called the bad fuel pump, but what if they're both leaking or something? So let's do that really quickly. The easiest way I found here to do this is just to have, I have this like bicycle floor pump with a pressure gauge. And this tip is from my blow nozzle and a couple adapters to a Schrader valve. And make sure that when you block this orifice and you you know, pump the pump, that the pressure stays when the system is blocked off. That's the only way you're going to get an accurate reading. So if I can get you on the gauge here somehow. This camera work is always sometimes tricky. So let's see. I'm blocking off the thing with my thumb and I pump it up. I just let it sit. You can see the pressure only decays when I let go of the nozzle. So that's good. Now we do the same check by putting the nozzle in our feed hole on the injector body, like so. I'll focus you in on the gauge. Pump it up to, well, I don't know, make sure it holds at least 30 pounds. You can see there's no bleed down. That is fantastic. We don't have to worry about this injector assembly. And just, you know, to prove it, when I let it go, there you go, all the pressure just released. So that's it. Bad fuel pump confirmed. Call the customer, let them know. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time. Maybe it'll be a part 2 on this guy. Bye-bye.